We are back. Flyers Talk Podcast. Ashlyn, Joe, and Jordan here with you, recapping, breaking down, and previewing a very important homestand for the Flyers here. Recapping an awesome game against Anaheim. Not as great a game against Toronto. Some injuries, some extensions, a lot to get into, and a lot of Flyers going on this week. But we're going to start here with, I don't want to call it a controversial topic, but I think everyone sees both sides of the story. Christian Dvorak getting a 5-year extension with the Flyers. Well-earned opportunity. A guy I think we all can agree, bet on himself, put everything on the table. Centers, they're hard to find. A reliable player. But I think the kicker, Jordan, what everyone's talking about is 5 years is a long time. It's a lot to invest in a player. So I see both sides of this. What'd you think of the deal?
Ashlyn, that was exactly what I was hearing from everyone, was that people had problems with the 5 years. I understand Christian Dvorak's going to turn 30 next month, and that's a pretty good term for a player going into his 30s. So old, you're right. I wish I could be 30 again. But that's the funny thing. I think Danny Briere even laughed about it, that he's just turning 30. It's not an 8-year deal. This guy's not in his mid-30s yet. And to me, there's compromise with every single contract extension. You have to negotiate, and I'm sure Dvorak's side wanted more term, and the Flyers realized that they were going to get a pretty good cap hit in a world where the cap is rising and centers are at a premium. And Dvorak's a really good player. He does a little bit of everything. I think he's going to age well into this contract, and I think the compromise was the years. And I just didn't have I didn't have a big problem with it, because I think the Flyers have been so center needy. They've needed this position. This is a guy that's come in and he's on pace for a career year. He's on pace to shatter his career high of 38 points. He does a little bit of everything. And I think the really good thing is, Ashlyn, that if the Flyers hit on some of their center prospects and these kids are ready to play, Dvorak can play a little bit of everywhere. He can play on the wing. He can play up. He can play down your lineup. So the Flyers will be able to move him around, I think, when they have some centers start to kind of come up through their system. So I just didn't really have a big issue with the 5 years. I think Dvorak earned this deal. The Flyers stated before the season, Keith Jones said they didn't want to be selling anymore unless they had to. So they were not going to trade this guy at the deadline unless they were at the bottom of the league. They're not. They're in a playoff position. So they wanted to re-up on Christian Dvorak, and the compromise was giving him some years.
Yeah, I think I'm going to use what Talk said the other day. I believe he said centers are gold, or centers are something like basically implying, what's that?
Some jewel.
Yeah, he said something like that. And the Flyers are not exactly overrun with that. So I'll say that to start. And also, I think this signifies that maybe they're not super comfortable with Zegras at center, maybe in terms of the defensive responsibilities. So you want to lock up what you have in place. And quite frankly, there's not a lot of guys on this team that win faceoffs. There's Sean Couturier. Dvorak's half decent in that. And even, we saw last night, I think Scott Lawton was 18 of 19 on faceoffs. So, they're lacking in the faceoff department. So I don't know. All of it made sense to me. I think people freak out all the time about contracts, and particularly the terms on the contracts. But if you look at it, and I'm going to compare it to the Rasmus Ristolainen contract some years back. Now listen, it was heavy when they signed it for a guy that hadn't played in the playoffs. He still hasn't played in the playoffs, and he struggled to stay healthy. But we're seeing right now the way he's playing, and you're talking about, his $5.1 million looks like a bargain, because if that player was on the open market, you could see being quite a bit higher. So what is this Dvorak contract going to look like if it was signed 2 years from now, 3 years from now? You don't know. This could be a bargain, the cap going up, all that sort of stuff. So I'm surprised to hear, Jordan, that people are really negative online about things that go on with the team. That's really surprising.
That's something new here in 2026. Yes, a rarity. But one thing that no one is upset about is Trevor Zegras's game against Anaheim. Game of the year. I thought it was so exciting. We were talking in the office. If you're a new hockey fan and you watch that game, be like, oh, I'm coming back for this. I mean, that was as exciting as it gets. And credit to Trevor Zegras for capitalizing on an opportunity, Jordan. It doesn't get much better than that in the regular season.
No, it doesn't, Ashlyn. I was going to say, if you were trying to win over a fan for the Flyers or for even just the sport of hockey, I would have told them to go to this game and experience this environment. It was really fun. Of course, the Cutter Gauthier storyline, everyone's into that. Fans are still on top of him, and they probably will be for a long time. But everyone almost kind of forgot that Trevor Zegras was facing his old team and that things didn't really end particularly well in Anaheim with him. He admitted that he felt like he was kind of shoved out the door. And so he had this game circled, and man, talk about answering the moment. And it really showed me that how much he cares, like how much he wanted this game. I think he maybe gets a perception out there that he's this kid with long hair. He likes to laugh and he maybe doesn't care all that much. No, you can tell this kid was a little ticked off about being traded and how much he wanted this game. And I think, so that to me really opened my eyes that this kid's competitive. And I thought that was really cool to see. And man, what a performance. Kudos to him. And it really just shows you how much he's entering this whole moment with the Flyers. I mean, he's pretty much a point per game player right now in Philadelphia. And this change of scenery has done wonders. And you can tell how much he's excited about Christian Dvorak being re-signed. Here's Zegras in a contract year, and I think he's eventually want to be excited to re-sign here. So I think the Flyers had to be just on cloud nine after seeing what Zegras did against his old team.
Yeah, it's interesting. Zegras is, I'm going to date myself here, but he's basically Jeff Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but instead of surfing, it's hockey. It's really, he's really injected a personality into this team. And I'm going to say it goes back to the last time they had this kind of personality was the days of Chris Pronger, Scott Hartnell, those guys. And of course, we now enjoy Scott Hartnell's personality each and every game. But in terms of in the locker room, that's the last time I remember this kind of personality. And it's, I mean, you can't find a time when this guy doesn't have a smile on his face. And it's like, you know, yeah, that team cast me aside. Ha ha ha. Like it's stuff that, I don't know, if you go around the league and you say, I don't know, if you were to interview Steven Stamkos about how his time in Tampa ended, I don't know that he's laughing about it. In fact, I'm quite sure he wouldn't be. So it's refreshing. And if there is a stat that I wish we could get, is how many Trevor Zegras jerseys were sold just from that game the other night. Because that, I think, would be fascinating.
My reporter senses are tingling that if I could go to the fan shop and speak to a manager, we could find that.
But the problem is there's more than one fan shop. That's right. And then you have the online, you know, with the people watching at home. Because I think if you're a kid, or if you have kids like I do, and you, as the football season winds down, and Zegras does things that's going to get people's attention of the younger age, and the younger age is then going to ask their parents for jerseys. This is the jersey they're going to ask for. So when you talk about this is a player that it might sound a little overstated to call him generational, but in the perspective of what I'm talking about with the jerseys, you could see a guy in his 50s getting a Trevor Zegras jersey and also getting one for their child that's 12 or 13. Mm-hmm. Or, yeah. You know, it's kind of one of those guys that we can bond over. When I was a kid, that player was Lindros, but Lindros didn't have this kind of electric personality. So this is I think it's something that fans need to realize not to take for granted, because it's not, especially in the sport of hockey, it's not like these personalities are everywhere. They're not everywhere you turn. And the Flyers have one of them right now. And I suspect that they're going to work tirelessly to keep him here past this year.
As they should. I imagine contract discussions, even though Danny Briere said they have not talked about that quite yet, I got to imagine those combos are starting up soon. And when you look at this weekend against the Lightning, really strange 2 home games against the Lightning. The Lightning are in town for 4 days here in Philadelphia. I think how we all feel about the overtime loss to Toronto the other night, it all depends, I think, how they rebound against the Lightning. If you can get one of these games against the Lightning, I think you look back and say, all right, hard-earned points against Toronto, made it to overtime. If you have a clunker against the Lightning and lose 2 of these games, then I think we're going to look at that Toronto loss in overtime and say, Jordan, that's what started everything.
Absolutely. And I think the critical thing, Ashlyn, is as much as that loss to Toronto hurts for the Flyers, they got a point. And like they're doing that a lot and it adds up. It's crazy how much those really tough losses can add up down the line. I looked at it in their last 30 games. They've picked up at least a point in 23 of them. They're 16-7-7 over that stretch. So they've lost a fair share of those games, but a lot of them are going after regulation. And that really will add up down the road. And it makes you feel a lot better, I think, about the Flyers. I think the biggest thing will be making sure they're healthy and not starting to really get hit by this injury bug. As we all know, Travis Konechny missed the 3rd period with the upper body injury, and I think that will be the big one. Jamie Drysdale, Bobby Brink didn't play as well against Toronto, but Konechny, I think, is just too important of a guy for them to lose. So I think we'll see on Saturday at morning skate if Konechny's okay or not, but they just can't afford to lose him.
I do think what you're going to start to get into now as we get to the second half of the schedule, both the time leading up to the Olympic break and after it, is you're going to get these games where the 3-point game is going to both help you and in some cases hurt you if it happens in the games that you're not playing, because there's so many teams that are involved in the race. So the way the schedule's built, as we've seen with the Flyers, there's a lot of these Western Conference games, the 2 time a years, that don't affect the standings in more ways than one. They're in the past. And now it becomes, you're going to start. I mean, if you think about some of the teams that are in the playoff spots in the East right now, the Flyers haven't played them at all. I think of Detroit. I mean, they played Toronto, they played the teams in their division, but there's teams that are in the mix that the Flyers really haven't seen, or they might have played them once. So the Lightning, for example, and it's why you're getting the odd, back-to-back home games against the same team. It almost looks like a mistake when you look at the schedule that they're playing these 2 games like this back-to-back, but you're going to start to get those 3-point games. And some nights the 3-point games are going to be you being the recipient of the 3rd point. And then other nights you're going to be dreading, like, all we want. I know we've heard it. Al and Scott say it on our show several times. What you don't want from that matchup is a 3-point game. And that would be the division matchups and the teams around the wild card spots. And I think that kind of stuff is really going to ramp up. So Jordan, what you said about them being healthy, I really think is going to be a key factor. And right now they are not bad, to say the least.
They're not. Yeah. All eyes on whether Travis Konechny will be able to return. I think it'd be far-fetched to see someone like a Bobby Brink. Maybe he comes back this weekend, but I think as a whole, just confusion about Travis Konechny, where he stands. So morning skate will be big to see if he can play against the Lightning, but it's a big weekend for the Flyers, a big 2 home games here. We'll see what happens. Thanks so much for tuning in to our Flyers Talk podcast. We'll recap these weekend games early next week. We'll see you then.